going to be a Flashback Pheasant Tail. I'm going to tie it a little bit larger just so you can see it better on the camera. And different than, you know, most pheasant tails that I usually tie, I've got this on more of a curved kind of scud hook. And then the other difference is going to be the obvious, it's called a Flashback Pheasant Tail because it's got pearl tinsel on it that's kind of flashy. So I'll just get this started on my hook just like that. Let my thread dangle. I'm going to start out with pheasant tail, and we'll be coming back to it over and over again. But as I always show you, pull those things straight up and away from the shaft of the feather there, and you'll notice that the tips will come into alignment. Once I have them in alignment, I'm going to pinch them to keep that alignment and just rip them right off just like that. And with this one, the tail is going to kind of wrap around with the hook a little bit. Usually I tie these pheasant tails on a straight nymph hook, but I like doing this flash pattern with more of the bent hook. So I'll just take a few thread wraps and kind of see where we are. And knowing that this is going to bend down like that around the hook. It may be a little bit long, but I'll probably just, maybe pull it a little bit, but not much at all. So I'm just going to hold this straight out as I come down around just the bend of the hook here, and I'm not going to necessarily need to go too deep. Then I'm going to come back up. And right about here, I'll just go ahead and come in with my scissors and cut the extra material off right there. So back at the beginning of the abdomen, which is going to be back here at the our abdomen's going to start here, and it's going to come up to about right around in here, and then we'll put our thorax in here. So back here, we have several materials to tie in. So it's one of the reasons I'm using nano silk here, the simplified nano silk, is because it just doesn't leave much of a footprint at all. So now that I've got the tail in place, I've got some brassy sized copper wire. I'm going to try to get that attached on the lens side of the hook, just with 2 or 3 thread wraps like that, and then I'll just pull on the wire, pull it backwards so that I don't need to cut it off with my scissors. And then we're going to come down and secure it right where that abdomen's going to start. So this is one of those patterns where, especially if you're just beginning, this is one of those you think ahead kind of flies. The very first thing I tie on here, other than the tail, is going to be the last material that I'm going to be using on the abdomen. So it goes on first. So we've got that in place. Our next material is going to be this kind of smaller pearl tinsel. And it's going to go right up over the back here. So the most important thing with this piece of material here is that we keep it on the top of the hook shank, just because it's going to be, we need it to come back up over directly over the top to create that kind of a flashy back there. So I'm going to be somewhat careful here just because I want to keep that centered. Take it down to about where we're going to have that abdomen start again. Now we've got 2 of our materials in and we have 1 more to go. We'll go ahead and lock that down. So the last material we're going to use for the abdomen, we're just going to come back to our pheasant tail again. I'm going to grab 5 or 6 fibers, pull those off of the stem of the feather there. I'm going to tie these in tips first because the butt ends are much thicker than the tip ends, and I want more or less bulk here and more bulk up here towards the front. So I'm going to tie this in. Last item I will be tying in for the abdomen. It'll be the first material that we will be wrapping up the shank of the hook to create the abdomen. So again, it's watching the right order as you're doing these things. I'm just going to take my thread back down. It's nano silk, so you can easily pull very, very tight on this and it won't break, but it'll cut right through that pheasant tail. So especially right where I'm starting, where those tips are the thinnest, I want to be really careful not to over tighten. So I've got my bobbin in the bobbin cradle. I'm actually going to use my hackle pliers on on this this just helps me to keep those fibers kind of straight up. Just more comfortable tying that way. So I'm just going to make sure I get one wrap. I've already got one fiber that's broken off, and that's fine. I'll show you how we'll deal with that as we move forward. I do want to avoid that hook point though, because that will cut right through the fibers that we're now moving up, trying to create an abdomen. And when you're tying, it's kind of your call. So like for me, I saw that fiber break loose, and I'm like, I still have plenty of fibers. I'm not overly concerned about that. And then I'll just remove it here in just a second, and it won't be a problem at all. But I do want to keep tension on those fibers because they would just come unwrapped. I want to take a couple of thread wraps over the top of that, securing it, locking it down against the shank of the hook. And then I'll take a few wraps also in front. And at that point I can let these hackle pliers go. And we'll just come in with our scissors here, and I'm going to cut off those butt ends. Just like that. This fellow, he's going to be hard to remove. We're gonna have to just go like that. Yep, it's that easy. So I'm going to next take that tinsel, or pearl tinsel, and I want that, as I said before, right over the top of the hook shank here. I'm just going to secure that down with a couple of thread wraps. I can actually wrap back over the top of it a little bit. And from there, now I'm going to grab hold of my copper wire, and we're going to counter wrap that. So I'm going to wrap it the opposite direction that I wrapped the pheasant tail. That just helps secure those pheasant fibers just a little bit more, because it's wrapping crossways over the top of those fibers. I'm just going to take, just like I normally do with a pheasant tail at this point, some evenly spaced wraps moving up towards the front of the hook here. Try to keep that tinsel out of the way. I probably should have just clipped it off, but I didn't, so we'll get it in a second. That's going to do me fine. I'm going to take a couple of thread wraps over the top of that copper wire. So the copper wire is being pulled towards the eye of the hook, and my wraps are more towards the bend of the hook. So these wraps are going over the top of that copper. Just a couple of wraps is really all it takes, and I'm going to take a few more wraps. And we'll use the old helicopter friction method. Just spiral that around. It'll get hot, it'll get brittle, and then it'll just break off really, really close, which is what we want. And I'll just take this back up straight, grab that flash material, balance of that, remove that. So now we're at the thorax. I've got myself another piece of pearl tinsel. This is more of a medium size, so it's a little bit wider. It's going to be our casing, our wing case here. It's going to go over our wing case. So I, again, want to make sure I keep this pretty centered over the top of the shank of the hook as I tie it in. It's mylar. It's very slippery material, so just know that going in. You may want to put some wax on your thread just so it doesn't slide around as much on you. I'm just going to secure that in place just like that. So from here we're going to turn back to our main ingredient again. We're going to go back and take some pheasant tail off. I'm going to tie this in tips first as well, but for a different reason. These tips are going to become our legs on this fly, and then we're going to fold the balance of the feather, the fibers, over the eye of the hook to create our wing case. So it's kind of important here for me to get a good measurement on how long I want those legs to be. Because once I lock this into place, we're going to be kind of set with what we've got. I'm going to draw those back just a little bit, trying to keep, for right now I want to make sure I'm keeping this butt end centered because it's going to become a wing case. I'm going to get myself some extra thread because I don't want to pull tight for this next piece. I just want to try to keep those leg pieces as much as I can on the top of the hook shank. And tighter you pull, they're going to have a tendency to want to splay out and spin around, and I don't want that. So I'm going to just kind of play with them a little bit. We've got that now up to right behind the eye, which is where I want it. Now I can put all the pressure on it that I want. Last material, I'm just going to turn to a peacock eye. Just going to grab, this is a size 16, so I may actually grab 2. Usually I'm tying smaller and I'll just use 1. Just pluck 2 herls off from the feather. I'm going to line the tips up because we're going to tie it in tips first. That's where the stem is a little bit lighter. So even though I'm tying it in by the tips to get that lighter stem, I'm still going to snip them off because that's just too brittle for me. I'll just break those off. I know myself too well. Then I'm just going to lay that peacock herl on the top of the hook here, and we'll go ahead and work on securing it down. So we've got our 1 thread wrap in place, and this is going to be kind of like the pheasant tail as well, where you don't want to crank down too hard on this material because it will, especially this nano, will slice right on through it. So I've got that secured, and all I'm going to do now is kind of create a better pathway for that to travel. We're pretty close already. I kind of like the way that it's tapering down towards the eye of the hook. So I got my peacock herls in place. I'm just going to go ahead and take a wrap over the top of those herls to kind of lock them into place. I'll take a wrap or 2, probably just a wrapper there. I can let those loose. Then I can come right on in here with my scissors and we'll just cut those off right as close as we can. And with that, we're getting very close to the very end. I'm going to move my thread backwards a little bit to give myself a little bit of space. When I'm doing the legs on my pheasant tail, all I'm going to do is take my thumb and I'm going to push those up and backwards. And I'm going to kind of wiggle them around to a point where I'm hoping to have about an equal number on either side. So you start seeing it kind of splayed out like that. And I'll sort of start stroking them back a little bit with my fingers as well. I'm not overly concerned with that because our next step is we're just going to take the butt ends of that pheasant tail. It's going to come over the top to be our wing case, and it's going to divide those legs for us as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull that over the top here. I have a straggler. I'm going to pinch that in place. I'm going to take my thread. We're going to go ahead and take a good couple of thread wraps here just to lock that in place. Then I can kind of survey my legs. Where are they? Are they looking okay? You know, we're kind of looking like that. I'm good with that. And then I'm just going to take a few more thread wraps moving back towards the bend of the hook. I'm going to lift the butt ends up, pull them backwards a little bit, and I'm going to get a couple of thread wraps right on the hook itself and not on the fibers themselves. Now I can come in with my scissors. We'll cut those fibers off nice and close. Okay, so our final step, we're just going to take this piece of tinsel, that larger piece of tinsel. I'm going to fold that over the top of that pheasant tail wing case that we just secured. I'm going to take a couple of wraps over the top of it, then I'm going to take a few wraps over the eye of the hook as well. And I'm okay applying a little bit of pressure here. From here I'm just going to pull that material straight up and backwards so that I can snip it off nice and close. So just put a little bit of head cement on those thread wraps. And there we go. There's the Flashback Pheasant Tail. Usually we'll tie this much smaller than this, so size 16. But we've got that pearl tinsel going over the very back here, as well as over the wing case. And then we use more of the curved hook. But other than that, it's pretty much straightforward pheasant tail pattern.